Hi, my friend. Welcome back to this week's episode on the Happiness Happens podcast. I'm going to ask you before we dive into this episode, I have some really big goals with this show. And we've been doing this podcast for quite a while now, since 2019. And I would be so grateful if you could share this episode or this podcast or any of the conversations that we have on this show with someone that you know would love these messages, needs to hear it, and wants more happiness in their life every single day. You have no idea how important it is as a creator, as a podcaster, as someone who comes and steps up to this mic every single week and shares amazing guests with you and amazing conversations, how powerful it is for you to share these conversations with other people in your network so that we can continue to grow, so we can continue to expand, make a really big impact, and share the message of happiness happens with everyone every single day. So thank you in advance for doing that. I'm so grateful for you. What I want to talk to you about today is how incredible my guest is. Oh my goodness, you're going to love her. Her name is Shā Sparks, and her and I met at a podcast conference a couple years ago. And then we met each other in person for the first time at the beginning of this year. And it felt like instant kindred souls, instant kindred spirits. And I was like, oh, my soul knows your soul. And it made me just so excited to have a conversation with her. And we dove into so many different topics about life and relationships and love and all these different things. And I was thinking to myself, how powerful would it be if you could hear how incredible Shā is? And so I was like, I have to bring her onto the podcast, and she needs to be a guest so that everyone can hear how incredible she is. Shā Sparks is an energetic catalyst and fearless communicator who sparks leaders in transition who are unclear, go from fear to fired up about their life and their business. Through her renowned Spark Your Alpha program, her audiences and clients experience more confidence, amplified emotional intelligence, and the spark that ignites their fearless action. She also provides an all-inclusive host for hire podcast in a box service called Spark Your Voice, podcasts to publications. As the CEO, which is Chief Excitement Officer of Sparks of Fire International, she hosts multiple podcasts along with her signature podcast called The Shā Sparks Show. She is also the author of How to Get Your Voice Back and is a certified fearless living coach and trainer. And she's also the co-founder of the Firestarters Book Project. You are going to just love her. And I will say, Sparks is her actual last name because I did ask her. Okay, let's get into this conversation with Shā. Share it with someone you love. Leave us a review of the show. Send me your love. I want to know you're listening. And thank you so much for tuning into this one. Let's get into it. Hello, Shā. Welcome to the Happiness Happens podcast.
Well, thank you, Simona, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you here. Our story of meeting was won by, I feel like, random chance. Like, we met at PodFest, which is a podcast conference, one of the bigger podcast conferences. And I feel like we knew of each other for quite a bit. And then we actually met in person. And I felt like I looked at you and I was like, oh my goodness, but where has she been all my life?
Same, sister, same. Felt the same way. And I believe we were connected on Facebook for actually maybe a couple of years.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And there's no better feeling than meeting your online friends in person. And I know you had done a couple of different podcast interviews with some mutual friends that we had. And I started to hear, more about you and more about the message that you share and the work that you do and all the different communities that you impact. And then when we met in person, I was like, oh my goodness, she's just so beautiful inside and out. And I was like, this is the kind of people that you need to have in your life. So thank you for being in mine.
I'm honored. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I do things a little differently around here. A lot of the times people would be like, tell me about yourself. And, I want to weave in your story throughout. But the very first question that I ask every single person that comes onto the Happiness Happens podcast is, what does happiness mean to you?
Great question. Well, first of all, let me start off by not saying I. Happiness is, to me, is really more of not just a feeling, it's about a way of being. And I mean that because your body feels alive, your consciousness, your mental capacity feels alive, but your emotions feel alive. So you can be happy, but happiness, that like goes all the way down to your bones, into your soul.
Hmm.
It's so much deeper. It's a deep gratitude, and you're embodying all of that all into one. That's what
I
happiness
love
means
that.
to me.
I
Thank you.
love that. And you know, no one's ever actually said that on the podcast before, that it goes right down deep into your bones. And it's funny because people try and describe it with words. And I think that happiness is something that it is, first of all, is so personal. You know,
Yes.
no two people will have the same feelings, even to what happiness means inside of them, in their body and in their life. And then the words that we use to describe happiness in and of itself are so different. Like, for myself, I find happiness, my definition of happiness is inner peace. But then it's like,
Mm,
what are all of the things that make up that inner peace, right? Like, what are all of
right.
the things that make up the components of who we are and how we find peace in our life? Like, those are the
Hmm.
little ways of happiness. I absolutely love that. So, okay, having that said, I
Yeah.
want to hear how you got into this spot that you're in now, because you do a lot of different work, and I want you to tell everyone a little
Mm.
bit about it.
Well, I was not happy in a moment of life. I had just gotten out of an abusive relationship and
Mm,
was really rebuilding, healing, rewiring my brain, like so
mm,
many different things, and just really, I call it my period of crawling through molasses, because that's really what it felt like such a slow journey to get to the other side. But I knew that there was going to be another side. And
mm,
even though it was slow in the moment, I thought about, what do I want the other side to look like?
mm,
And I have a strong faith and a strong belief system. And I feel like I was co-creating with God by journaling. What do I want the other side to look like? And so during my healing journey, I would learn things about myself. And at the time, I was a hairstylist. And, as you do, you go into your hairstylist and you share stories, right? You share
oh
about
yeah.
you, and then they share about them. And so it was always very mutual with all of my clients. And it was like, so what's been going on with you? Blah, blah, blah. And they would tell me, and then they'd be like, what about you? And I'm like, oh my God, you're never going to, you're never like, you can't wait to tell you what I learned about myself this week. I'm emotionally unavailable, or I use sarcasm as communication, or I blah, blah, blah. And they're like, what? And so what ended up happening is I would share about me. Now, of course, it was never that blunt. It was very closed off and scared and
Mm,
and very quiet, because I wasn't used to being vulnerable. I mean, that V word that is just so hard to even pronounce at the time. I couldn't say
yeah.
vulnerable. But as time went on, they would go away for their 4 to 6 weeks and then come back. And they said, because of what you shared with me last time and what you did about it to
Mm,
get to the other side of it, my relationship shifted with my boss or my spouse or my kids or my parents or whoever, my team.
wow.
And have you considered being a coach? Have you considered being a motivational speaker or starting a podcast or writing a book? And then, to be honest, there was this part of me that in the very deep back of my head was like, yeah, I've thought of those things, but I can't tell you that. But the other side was, I've thought of those, but there's no way I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I was so blessed to have people speak life into me at that moment of time in my life, I just got to the point where I thought, well, what if they're right? What if they see something in me that I don't see in myself? And I borrow their confidence that they have in me
Mm,
and go down that path and find out what it looks like to be a speaker, to start a podcast, to become a coach and write a book. And if I don't like any of those things, I've just learned new skills.
yeah.
And so what? I learn new skills and I can remain being a hairstylist forever. And as that started to happen, the journey of, okay, I don't really want to be a hairstylist till I'm, till I die, because that's normally what ends up happening.
Yeah.
I was like, I got to figure out something else. I want to, at 50, I would have been a hairstylist for 31 years. And I was like, that's so young. Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So my goal was to get out before, and I was able to do that. And just in the last year and a half was fully, quote unquote, retired from that. I stepped away to fully focus on being the coach and the speaker and the podcaster and all the things.
I love that. Oh, that is amazing and
Thank you.
incredibly difficult to actually do and walk away from,
Yes.
because
Yes.
there's a level, right? Like there's a level of
Yes.
safety that
Oh,
comes
yeah.
with, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like this level of safety is what keeps us feeling secure in
Mm.
what we think we are meant to be doing, relationships we're meant to be in, spots that we're supposed to be in our life, where we're supposed to live geographically. Because I think what happens is, as we grow up, we're not really encouraged to look outside of the box that people are giving us,
Right.
right? Mm-hmm. And it sounds
Yeah.
like this kind of is what happened to you a little bit, in that you maybe had this box,
Mm-hmm.
and then you were very slowly encouraged to like take off the wrapping paper of this box
Mm-hmm.
and try on something new, right?
Yeah. So the way I was able to get out of this long-term relationship that was abusive,
Mm-hmm.
when I was able to walk away, I started counseling in that first week. He was in a car accident, so I really had an opportunity. And
Wow.
I asked myself something that, had I not done work before this, like read books and podcasts, but I was also in the personal development space in my 20s. And now at this point in my life, I'm in my 30s. And I started to ask myself a question that most people don't even think about. And the question was, what is it that I don't know that I need to know in order to move forward? Most of the time, we look at what we know.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that there was a whole lot outside of what I knew. There was a whole lot outside of a comfort zone, so to speak, of what I didn't know, what I needed to learn, how I needed to heal, how I needed to be, what love looked like, what happiness looks like, right? I needed to create all of that. I didn't have any experience in that. Even I learned that because of the house that I grew up in, this relationship was familiar.
Hmm.
So it was like, oh, okay, got it. So that's why I was in the relationship I was in. Got it. So what does healthy relationships look like? What do healthy fights look like? Because I didn't see any of that. And so I literally started to practice stepping out of my comfort zone on a regular basis. And I surrounded myself with people who were completely nothing like me
Hmm.
on purpose. So
Love
I
that.
started going to networking events and business networking events around people, not just who owned businesses, but were, highly successful CEOs and senior VPs and all of that, for the purpose of really understanding who they were and really understanding how to engage in a healthy conversation. And what the craziest thing that started to happen is that I had to be vulnerable.
Hmm.
And remember, I was barely saying it in the beginning,
Yeah.
right, of my story. So
Yeah.
now here I am putting myself in a safe place with safe people to be vulnerable, but I didn't know they were safe, right? You're talking about safety. But I thought the worst thing that could happen is they don't talk to me again. Who cares? What ended up happening
Right.
is they were like, well, tell me about your business. And I'm like, oh,
Huh.
well, funny story. You should ask that. I'm actually a hairstylist. And they're like, oh my gosh, do you need more clients? And I go, no, that's not why I'm here. And they're like, so what are you here for? And I go, I'm here to meet amazing people and have really great conversations, because
Hmm.
I know one day I'm going to do something else. I just haven't figured out what that is yet.
Right.
Right. I didn't realize I was going to be interviewing
All
entrepreneurs,
kinds, right?
but
Like
that's
having
our
incredible
leaders.
having incredible
Right.
conversations and changing the
Right.
world, but no big deal. That's fine.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, I interview leaders. So it's like, oh, well, of course that's what I do because that's what had been doing. And it was just so fascinating to be where I realized that one of my, I won't call it superpowers, but one of my gifts was that people trust me and tell me everything, tell me their stories.
Hmm.
And at first, I was a little taken aback by that. Like, and I had noticed when I was a kid that I would, be in a grocery store and people would just automatically start turning and talking to me, like getting something in at the grocery store. But I never thought about, and people would tell me all their problems growing up. Never thought about it as a gift.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I had a certain, somebody started telling me their story as they were driving to work. And it was a very, man, talk about being vulnerable. He was very vulnerable. And it
Oh,
was about
wow.
childhood abuse. And I thought, oh my God, I felt horrible that this guy is on his way to work and he's setting the tone for his day by sharing with me his stuff, right? Like his
Wow.
past. And I was like, oh my God, I feel horrible. And then I realized it has nothing to do with me. I'm
Hmm.
just the catalyst. I'm just the person that listens. I'm just the safe place for them. Right. And then I thought, well, what if this isn't a curse? This is really a blessing. This is a
Hmm.
gift that people trust me. And that's one of the reasons why I became a coach, is because all of my clients, all of my hair clients were like, hey, you've been coaching me for years behind the chair. It just
Yeah.
makes sense that you're a coach. And I was like, oh, got it. You're right. And so to just be able to to learn the gifts that we each are given, or that we develop over our lifetime, and really notice that about myself and be aware of it and then utilize them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been an
Life
amazing
changing.
journey.
Yeah. That's incredible. And there's so many wisdom, like nuggets of wisdom in everything that you just shared.
Mm.
And it's really interesting. So earlier today, and by the time this episode goes out, the episode would have already been out. But I had Mark Ronick, our mutual friend,
Yeah.
in on my podcast as well, and we were talking a lot about vulnerability and like the word
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability. And he was talking about like the language behind the
Yeah.
words that we use. And he was saying how only recently has he looked into understanding vulnerability from like a different lens, and
Mm-hmm.
he started to find different words for it. And one word that he said was brave.
Yeah.
So, vulnerability requires a certain level of courage to
Absolutely.
be
Yes.
brave. Exactly.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I think it's kind of incredible how we develop this awareness. And I think that, tell me if this resonates with you, but I know for myself, like when I first started understanding personal development and like wanting to be in this space and doing a lot of this healing work, I kept describing it as like, I want something more, but it wasn't
Yes.
more money. It wasn't more stuff. It wasn't more friends. It wasn't more of any of that. I think what it was I wanted this feeling of more like intimacy with myself, you know what I mean? And like
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of who I am and understanding of the world around me. And I think that it can be really hard when you're sort of in the beginning part of this journey or even through it to put specific words and language on what you're going through and what you're experiencing. It can be really challenging when you really don't know what to do next or where to even begin.
Well, if I may share that, what you
Please.
just said about the wanting more, I was there too. And the word I realized what I was really wanting was fulfillment.
Hmm.
Right? I wanted to be fulfilled in a way that was making an impact, a positive impact in other people's lives, in the masses, not just in the one-on-one. I had been
Yeah.
doing that for my whole career behind the chair, but I wanted to be able to reach and touch more people.
Yeah.
And I've noticed as the people that I coach, it's that I want more because I'm not being fulfilled And so for me, that when you talk about happiness, you talked about peace. It's just not that inner peace. It's the inner joy. It's that fulfillment. It's that inner validation of
Mm,
where we are. Right.
love
So
that.
when I say that, I got the chills, because it's really about the inner work, right? In
Mm-hmm.
order to overflow onto the people around us.
Mm, beautiful. Now, if you're listening to this and you are sitting here like, okay, I want that fulfillment. I want that inner peace. I want that inner joy. I want that feeling of more, but I really don't know where to begin. Where do I start?
So again, I'm a spiritual person. So
Mm, we can go there. I like that.
I'm a spiritual person, and I, many years ago, decades ago, I started journaling. And after my first journal entry, the next journal entry, then I realized it became a thank you letter to God.
Hmm.
And it really was about being in a state of gratitude to the nth degree, because I was really being thankful for every gift that He had given me in a way that I hadn't seen before, because I was in a relationship that was so controlled. And so I was like, wow, thank you for like the new life, but on
Yeah.
a literally a different scale.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing, how to start on this journey, is to really find at least 5 things to be grateful for, and journal about that on a daily basis.
Mm,
And then for me, that's really where it started. And then it was like, okay, what's next? And it goes back to that, well, what is it that I don't know that I need to know in order to move forward? And forward is a word that is like, well, what does forward mean? Right. And to me, it goes back to that question of what's next. When we're looking through a lens of, well, let me be curious and just explore what's next, rather than having an attachment to a goal and then being upset when that goal doesn't happen, it
yeah.
becomes a different, you then have a different path.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I'd mentioned earlier, I would go to these networking events and people would say, well, what is your goal for this event? Like, what do you want to get out of? What is your expectation? What do you want to get out of, being here? And I said, oh, I don't have an expectation. I don't have a goal.
I love
And
that.
they're like, well, how can you do that? And I go, well, I'm here to just go through curious exploration. That's
Hmm.
that's what I'm here for. And I'm here to just see who I'm supposed to meet, who am I supposed to connect with, who am I supposed to connect you with, and what am I supposed to learn about me?
Love that.
Not to mention what I'm supposed to learn about you, but what am I supposed to learn about me?
Hmm.
And I think if we come from a lens of being curious about ourselves, then that just opens up everything. So then it leads to
Hmm.
more of, well, do I need to hire a coach? What coach do I go to? Do I need to read books? Do I need to listen to podcasts? And I have to tell you, there are no wrong answers. None. Because every single book I've ever read, every person I've connected with, every coach I've ever hired, every journal entry I've ever written has
Yep.
literally led me to where I'm here today.
Yep.
And I just believe that every step that you take is opening the door to the next thing that's going to open the next door,
Hmm.
rather than looking at it as the destination of the goal, looking at it as the journey. And what am I learning along the way? For me,
Hmm.
that's really the next step. That's the place to begin, is what do I need to learn?
Mm-hmm. I love this. And I actually had to take out a notebook and a pen. And I haven't jotted down notes on an interview in a very long time. Normally, I'm just like, oh, yeah, like, yes, yes, yes. Like, but you were saying so many things that are specifically resonating in this point that I'm in my own life, and the stuff that I'm going through in my own life. And one thing that is very important that I've done this year that's been really transformational in terms of growth and along the personal development journey and all that, was getting very clear about what my values are in life.
Yes.
And I'm so clear on what those are. The first three is kindness, care, connection. If it's not kindness, care, and connection, I don't want it. It doesn't belong in my life.
Yeah.
And so you said, and I even witnessed this when we were in Denver together a few months ago, this connection piece. And I think that you embody so many of you, who you are as a human being embodies my own values, even though they may not be your values. It's just who you are as a person is kindness, is care, and is connection. And so when you say, you go to this place, whatever place, and you're there for your own, sort of growth, which is not, some people might look at that and be like, oh, like a little bit, like that could be self-serving, but it's not, like get your own self, and like getting yourself right is the most important thing, because when you don't have that, you can't do any of the other things. Right. And you were such a beautiful connector for me when we were there. And maybe in some way, maybe I was too, you know what I mean? But it was just, so when you said that, like, who am I supposed to connect with, and who am I supposed to, be connecting other people to? And then also, what am I learning about me? And following these little nudges, it's about following these next right things. So here's the thing, like I'm a pretty spiritual person in general. Okay. In the last few years, it's always been a lot about energy. My relationship to religion and to God was very rocky for a lot of years. Let me tell you, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and you're young and you don't understand, and you don't really have the time and space to form your own relationship with that.
Right.
People tell you what the relationship should be like.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so as I got older, I realized that I lived in this space of lack and not being able to be vulnerable, and feeling overwhelmed and feeling fearful and being scared of being alone, scared of death, worried about, like, I couldn't even envision my life. Like, I had no idea. I was like, you asked me to write out what my life looked like, I was like, not a chance. I have no idea. And what I realized is that comes from having a lack of faith in yourself and faith in whatever creator you want to believe in. Okay. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's source energy. So since then, I've definitely, I think I've prayed more this year than I ever have in the last 10 years, maybe 15 years or something like that. And it creates space for the next right step to happen, in my opinion. I don't know. So when you say following that nudge, and this attachment that we have to the outcome that we put on ourselves and in our lives, we're trying to control, which I have issues with control, not in an abusive way, but like I like to control situations. It's something I'm realizing.
Yep. Me
But
too. I
you
used to
have
be
to
that way. Yes.
detach, right?
Yes.
And you have to
Yes.
detach. And the only way that you do that, I think, and you tell me what you think, is following these little nudges. Because let's be honest, there's 150 million ways that you could live your life, right? If you think about, there's probably a whole bunch of different dimensions in which you chose this thing and this was your life, and you chose this thing and this could have been your life. But the reality is you're living in the life that you're living in right now because of the choices that you've made. So there are no right or wrong choices. There's just the choice that's made for you. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, what comes to mind as you say that about control is surrender. So when
It's so hard, Shā.
It is. It really is. I mean, believe me, I'm
hard.
a control freak, recovered control freak. So I get it.
I never thought I was a control freak, and then I started realizing all these situations. I'm like, hold on here, I feel out of control. Oh, anyways, something to heal, right?
And that's where the growth is, right? Is when you let go of control. So let's just pretend, because I've had a lot of people that I've done this exercise with, they go, oh, that doesn't make any sense to me. You just take a blank sheet of paper and a pen, and whatever comes up in your mind is what you're going to write. Even if starts out with, this is so stupid. Because then you're releasing control. You're surrendering to your thoughts, right? So, I'm getting the chills again. So you literally are just capturing your thoughts. Now, as you're doing this, you start to notice that things will pop up out of nowhere. Okay. Now, this was a practice that I started again many decades ago. And I have now learned that when we're still And when we do that whole be still and know, right? We trust, right? Have the faith. But we use the pen or pencil, crayon, whatever, and paper, old school style, not the device. There's something that happens in our brain. It creates a neural pathway. Then that if we do what I call a brain dump, it travels through our arm out to the pen, onto the paper, that a lot of times the things that we're overthinking and overanalyzing are released. So then we let go of that control onto the paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as we're surrendering, then what ends up happening is then God, the creator, the source, or universe, whatever you want to call it, starts to speak to you intuitively. And the more quiet time that you create and the more journaling you do, then you can start to ask questions and get a dialogue. So then you can ask, okay, God, I believe I'm ready. What is my next step? And then wait. And
Hmm.
whatever thought pops up, you write down. And the reason I
I love
started
that.
doing that is because if I had a plan for my life, it would have looked a whole lot different than what it does right now, right? And I moved to Florida a year and a half ago. Never in a million years did I ever think I'd move to Florida. But because of the journaling process this way, so it's more of an intuitive writing, intuitive surrender, it allows you then to see it in a different form, because now you're not just the audible learner, you're the kinetic learner because you wrote it, and now you're the visual learner because now you're seeing it in your own handwriting as a confirmation of what to do next.
Love that. I love that. And I think my controlled brain, if you want to call it that, for so long was like, well, is doing this enough? You know what I mean? Like, is writing it out on a paper?
Mm.
But like, for all of my fellow control freaks, it can be just that. Like, that can
Yeah.
be it. And that's all
Yeah.
you need to do. And it doesn't have to be more than that. And I think for a long time, Shay, I really thought that the healing journey was. It had to be complicated and it
Right.
had to be like always crying or always sitting with every single emotion and feeling it. I mean, I think you should feel your emotions and feel them the whole way through. Like, yes, I
Mm-hmm.
actually do think that. But I, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be devastating. The
Right.
healing journey doesn't have to be like some moments are hard, but it is just that it is a journey and it never ends. It is always
Right.
happening.
Right. Yeah, I call it peeling away the layers of the onion that we are, although there is no center. It just keeps going. There is no
An
center. It just
infinity
keeps
onion. I
going.
don't think I like
Yeah,
that.
just keeps going. And I actually kind of like that because you look at it as a refinement, right? We're
Mm,
peeling away these layers to be refined. And then when we're done refining is when we're no longer here,
right.
right? So again, it
Right.
goes to that journey, that it's not about the destination. And I say that because when I was growing up, and it wasn't until I got out of this relationship that I realized I was literally waiting my entire life to die up until my 30s. And I was like, I didn't think I'd make it to 30. I remember being a teenager, a
Wow.
teenage alcoholic, and I'm like, oh, I'll never make it to 16. I'll never make it to 18, never make it to 21, 25, 30. And now here I am
Wow.
mid 30s going through this journey. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I've just been
Mm-hmm.
waiting to die.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow. So what if we look at it from the different lens of, well, what do I want to do? And well, what am I called to do in the moment? And what if I lived life from that perspective? And then
Mm,
that way it's a whole different ball game. Then it's more of a, what I say is, God has worked in me so he can work
mm-hmm.
through me.
I really like that.
Mm.
I really like that a lot. And I think there is there are so many different ways that you can go on this journey. And I remember thinking to myself when I was younger, 15, 16, into tons of drugs, into alcohol, like all of the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing. And I also it was never that I couldn't see like my future, but I also couldn't see my future. You know what I mean? Like, you know, when people like plan
Yeah.
and have these plans for their life and all this stuff. And for me, it felt just empty. I was like, there's no plan. You know what I mean? And it's been very
Mm-hmm.
much just like rolling with the punches of life. You know what I mean? I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, cool. Land in this job. That sounds good. Or like, you know, this corporate job sounded really good. Oh, okay. Start a business. Sure. Like, why not? And I felt like a lot of the stuff I did in my life, like, just really didn't have a whole lot of intention behind it. But I think it's because there
Mm.
was no faith in my life. There was nothing at the center of it. It was just me trying to fit and trying to find that inner peace that I was looking for so long,
Mm.
that you can only find like when you actually start doing that work on yourself, you know?
Well, maybe that's the center of the onion, is that fulfillment, that peace, that joy, that happiness. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're saying to me is this is the end of my journey and I'm going back up to heaven. No, I'm just kidding. Because you said there's nothing at the center. No, I'm just joking.
But maybe that's what it is, right? The center
Mm-hmm.
is, after we keep peeling away the layers, is that, and truly, I mean, most people at the end of their life, when they know they're ill, right, or something, they're in that contentment piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But
they're in
imagine we
that
could
inner
have that
peace and that
all
joy.
throughout. Yeah.
Right. And you can, I believe. So as you peel away these
Oh, I do
layers,
too.
you get glimpses of that, but then
Mm-hmm.
it just keeps going to a deeper level of it.
Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of the whole other piece that I've been learning this year too is, you know, it's one thing to start peeling back those onions for yourself, but then those onions, as those layers, as they peel back, they impact other people in your life too, who have thoughts and
Mm.
beliefs about how you should be, who you should be, where you should be living, who you should be with, the type of life
Mhm.
you should be living, how you should be spending
Yeah.
your time every single day, the type of daughter you should be, the type of friend, the type of sister,
Mhm.
like all these things. And people have their own view about
Yeah.
your life through their own lens, and it's about helping them to relearn too, because at the end of the day, like when I feel very overwhelmed, I think about this often, we're literally on a spinning globe in the middle of nowhere, you know, like nothing is that
Yeah.
serious.
Right. Right.
So why not create, and why
Right.
not get past those really hard stories to live a life that makes you feel fulfilled. Whew.
Amen.
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 Amen. Okay. I want to ask you this question, and it's the last question that I have for you today. And it's a question that I ask all of my guests when they come on the podcast. And I've been asking it for 3 years, almost four, is for our listener today, how can they create a little more happiness in their day every day starting today?
That would be the gratitude journal.
Yeah, I love
Really
that.
just starting with that. Just start doing 5 a day.
Hmm.
And, people are like, "Well, I can't find 5 things to be grateful for." Well, look harder.
Yeah.
Look
Oh,
deeper.
yes.
Right? It could be as simple as I have a cat right now who's running amok. So it could be the simple fact that the cat used the litter box all day. You know what I mean? Or, something like that, or your child didn't get sick today, or, whatever it could be. Like, you had a good day at work. You had a great conversation with a random stranger, or,
Mm-hmm.
you saw again, I used to work in the salon. So there was a sticker in the public bathroom mirror that said, "You are beautiful."
Oh, I love that.
So just think about that. Like, that's something to be grateful for, a reminder
Mm-hmm.
that you are beautiful. So yeah, just find the gratitude.
I love that. Amazing. Shay, thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's such a joy.
You're so welcome. Can you tell everyone where they can connect with you?
Yes, they can go to my website at shasparks.com, and you can find me on social media at Shā Sparks, or the Shā Sparks on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And my podcast is the Shā Sparks show.com.
Love it. Amazing. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to this week's episode of the Happiness Happens podcast. If this episode resonates with you, be sure to connect with both Shay and I. Let us know what you thought of our conversation and any nuggets of wisdom or gold in there that you want to tell us that you loved. We both want to hear from you. I know Shay does, and I always love to hear from you. So please be sure to reach out. Thank you so much for joining this conversation today. I cannot wait to see you on the next one. And remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.